G'day, Justin Hogg here from RightSource, talking to you all things corporate governance and not-for-profit. And I wanted to share today a few boards I've been working with have sort of, especially recently joined with the new clients. One of the questions I get asked a lot is like, as a board, we're very operational and we really want to move to being a more strategic board. So I thought what I'd talk through in this video is how, as a board, you can put things in place to help give you that opportunity to become more strategic if that's what you feel you need to do as a board. And so take you through that. So obviously, the first thing you need on your list if you want to be more strategic is you really do need to have a strategic goal or a vision or something you're working for longer term. So that's probably the first step of anything. Like, there's no point saying you want to be strategic if you don't have a strategic direction. So that's the first cab off the rank, if you like. And most organizations have that, especially not-for-profit. You set up your purpose. Implicit in that purpose is a longer-term strategic goal or purpose. So, okay, what next? Well, the next thing is you need to have really, it depends on the life cycle of where you are as a not-for-profit. So, and it sort of combines the two things. When you're first starting up, you're not-for-profit, it's hard to say that I don't want to be operational because you generally don't have a lot of resources. So the board is the one that's doing things as well as thinking longer term. So, your life cycle is something to consider in terms of where you're at. But the other thing then flowing on from that is really, if you want as a board to be more strategic and move that operational stuff away, you need to have resources who are able to be operational. So that's really talking about the size and capacity of your organization, and having a CEO or an executive team that are able to do that operational work. Obviously, it's the life cycle, being able to have resources you can delegate to. The next thing then to be aware of when you do have those resources is that ability to delegate. Now, that might sound simple, but really there's a whole flow of information in here, and it's about making sure that those you're delegating to do the operational stuff have the responsibility, have the accountability, and have the authority to go and do that operational stuff. If those three things don't exist, and if you don't hold those people to being account in terms of doing that operational work, what you'll find is you'll end up diving back into the operational stuff because they're not doing their job. So you need to hold them to account to do their job, but you need to have that check-in process to be able to make sure that they are doing their job. That way you've got more chance of letting that operational stuff stay in the management side of the business and give you more space to look at the strategic stuff. Okay, you've got in place a goal, you've got a team that can do the operational work, you're holding them to account, they're clear on what their roles are. What else do you need as a board? Probably the other thing that I think is very useful in terms of starting to talk about strategy in a meaningful way is really having a good understanding of risk. Now, this is not just a risk register or something like that. It's really understanding what your risk appetite is, understanding how you apply risk to certain situations, because what you'll find is risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. So if you're looking at opportunity, you also need to understand how you're going to manage the risk of that opportunity as well. And being able to have a meaningful discussion around where the organization sits in terms of their risk profile and the risk appetite for undertaking certain strategic opportunities is really important to be able to frame that conversation. What too often I see is that boards get into this risk-averse point of view where they don't want to take on risk. And really that makes it very hard to look at opportunities, because if you just don't want to take on any risk, where do you go? So really an understanding of risk and what it means for your organization and how you apply that is then another really important precursor to being able to make your board more strategic. Say you've got all that, you've got your team in place, they're doing operational stuff, you understand risk and how it applies to the organization, you've got your strategic goal, it's all there, but you still seem to be operational in what you're doing at board meetings. And this is, I suppose, the main point where I've really seen a couple of things that really can help pivot a board to being more strategic is that say, well, we've got all this stuff that, that you said are the precursors to being strategic. We've done all that, and yet we're still operational. Why? Well, because everybody's human. And this is really important. What you put in front of a board and how you structure those board meetings is where they'll go. So where you look is where you go. So there's two aspects to this. First of all is the board papers. Now, you can say, well, we want to be strategic, but when you look at the content of the papers that are being presented to the board, let's say it's a 100-page board pack. Quite often, 60 to 70% of that pack are operational reports, updates on how we're going in these areas, all talking about the now and how the operations are functioning, because that's what they've always presented to the board. So when you present an operational paper to a board, the immediate response to the board is, well, you put this in front of me, you want my feedback, they'll give you feedback. Because that paper is operational, the feedback you'll get is operational. So you're not creating a conversation in terms of strategic. So what you really want to be able to do is at a board level, now you don't have to do this for every board meeting, but where you want to have a strategic discussion, you want to really cut back that operational reporting. So really the CEO should be able to provide, maybe a 3 or 4 page update on how operations are going, your financial pack, try and keep that, brief and to the point. If you've got a dashboard or KPIs, that's great. That can help, again, bring it down. And then really have in that pack, business cases, opportunity briefs, pipeline conversations, market analysis. Try and put some of those things in there. When you put something like that in there, even if it's a paper on market analysis and where the organization sits, because that's more outward looking, future focused paper, that will create a conversation that's more strategic just because that's what's in front of the board. So probably from this, that's my number one big tip in terms of becoming more strategic, is really look at your board papers and how they're put together and do it on purpose. So really pull apart what you're putting in front of the board and control what goes in front of the board, because that's the time to do it. Once it's in front of the board, it's too late. If it's all operational papers, that's where they'll go. The second point is sort of interrelated to that, and it's about creating that space for the strategic conversation. So you'll have a work plan or a schedule of when you have board meetings, and they'll have a flow. So quite often they'll be, okay, you have your update, your operational update, this is your committee reports, and it'll all be very operational. And to say, okay, we'll change the board pack for a meeting and just do strategy might be a bit unnerving. So what you can do is update your work calendar. So you throw in 1 or 2 extra board meetings that are specifically meant for strategic focus, and you flag them like that in the calendar. So this meeting is a strategic focus. So that way it gives permission for the CEO, for the chair, for the company secretary to create a meeting agenda and papers that support that are of a strategic focus. And it could be whatever is coming up in terms of the strategy. Is it growth? Is it new product offerings? Is it just being able to do engagement and advocacy work? What is it that you'd really like to do but you never get a chance to talk about? That's what those meetings can be for. Sort of taking that another step, what I've seen that works well is sometimes where you alternate your board meetings. So say if you're meeting monthly, you just alternate them and say, well, this monthly meeting is meant to have a strategic focus and this one's meant to have an operational focus. And that doesn't mean you preclude strategy and operations from either one, but it means that when you're setting that agenda, when you're setting the board papers, if it's a meeting with a strategic focus and there's operational stuff that doesn't really need to have a decision or need to be there, it allows you to siphon it off and maybe push that to the next meeting and get that agenda for the strategic meeting more clear, and again creating that space for that strategic discussion. That's probably an outline from my point of view in terms of how you can help your board becoming more strategic. Obviously there's some precursors to it, but really the 2 main things I've seen that make a big difference in moving your board from being operational to strategic is how you compile your board papers and also how you set up your meeting, work plan and schedule to create that space and that opportunity to have a strategic discussion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to chuck your comments down below if you've got any questions, or check out the other videos we've got on YouTube. Otherwise, feel free to, if you do have any other questions and you want to ask specific, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. Always happy to have a conversation. Otherwise, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. It's Justin Hogg from RightSource.